At Cyclist Magazine, we travel all over the world in search of the best places to ride bikes. And honestly, I think of all the rides we've ever done, the one that has stuck in my mind the most has been to Slovenia's Julian Alps. And this year, SloVelo Escapes can take you there too. Now, just to let you in on what that ride was like, we rode up the Würzig Pass and the Mangart Saddle Road. And these roads are just insane. I mean, I've never seen anything where there's such an incredible combination of hairpins, tunnels, elevation, and even cobbles. Now, the Würzig Pass literally has 50 hairpins over 24 kilometres, and then the Mangart Saddle Road winds up nearly a kilometre through 5 tunnels and then summits at over 2,000 metres. So this year, with SloVelo Escapes, you can discover these roads too. And they've got an amazing package to the Julian Alps. It's running from the 2nd to the 8th of June, and prices start from just £1,400 for a week. Now, that's everything from airport transfers through to expertly guided, fully supported riding, staying in luxury accommodation, and eating food made by your own private chef. All you've got to do is ride your bike around some of the most incredible roads in Europe. I mean, you just go to Slovenia and you kind of think, it's no wonder that Tadej Pogačar ended up being so good if this was where he grew up and this was where he learned to ride a bike. So head over to sloveloescapes.com. That's sloveloescapes.com and saddle up for your next big cycling adventure in Slovenia. Welcome back to the Cyclist Magazine Podcast. I am your host, James Spender, and joining me today, extra special, I was going to say guest, you're not a guest. You could be a guest because you're interesting enough. It's Robyn Davison, ladies and gents, web writer extraordinaire, sometimes moonlights on the magazine, and you'll have heard her dulcet tones on the podcast before. So please take it away, introduce our guest for this episode, and let's get rolling with somebody with some genuine insights, not just my ramblings.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for this podcast episode. We have Connie Carpenter-Phinney, obviously a retired American professional cyclist, and she was the first woman to ever win an Olympic gold medal in the women's road race back in the 1984 Olympics. She was also a 3-time winner of the Coors Classic, and she's a mother of former pro Taylor Phinney and mother-in-law of Kasia Niewiadoma. After her husband, Davis Phinney, was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's at the age of 40, she's now on the board of their established Davis Phinney Foundation, whose focus is for people to live well with Parkinson's today. And on their website, they have a plethora of resources, information, events, and I'm really excited and looking forward to see where this chat takes us.
So where are you joining us from, Connie? Whereabouts are you in the States? You're in Boulder?
Yeah, I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Very nice. And what's the weather like? Do you get out on your bike on a morning like this morning, or is it something that you don't really do anymore because you've done as many miles as you ever care to do on a bicycle?
Well, it's 34 degrees. Whoa. So I'll tell you one thing. So that's 34 on the Fahrenheit scale. Yeah. I do not ride my bike when it's 34 degrees. But no, we still, Davis and I still ride a little bit. We ride on e-bikes. The technology on e-bikes is fantastic. We have gravel bikes, and we get plenty of a good workout, but we also get a little boost when we need it. So we take it.
And so I think the thing that most people will know you best for in the UK, different sort of audience and a different kind of growth and stratospheric growth and bedrock as well in women's cycling, US versus the UK. But what does translate is gold medal at the 1984 women's road race at the Olympics, which was the inaugural women's road race. You also went there with were you married at that point, or were you just still dating Davis, your husband, Davis Phinney?
No, we were married.
How was it going away with your husband to compete in separate events and then also coming away with the gold when he got, I whisper it, a bronze, I think?
Well, let's back up a second. First of all, in terms of being known for anything, I think that a woman of my generation is barely known, really, to be honest with you. And I was known in my town and then my state, and certainly in certain sectors, and by people who followed cycling at the time. And at the time, we had a really big bike race here in Colorado, so I did have a good following. But I would say, I was just talking about this the other day, that I think if I stood in front of the women's peloton today, aside from my daughter-in-law, Kasia Niewiadoma, there are a few women in the peloton who know who I am, and that's because we haven't written our history down. We haven't done enough to support our history and to write about it and applaud it, really. But anyway, it was a long time coming to get to the 1984 Olympic Games, July 29th, to be exact, the opening day of the Los Angeles Olympic Games. And unfortunately, my husband and I raced on the same day. I think that was really rough. I don't think. I think we both would have done well. I couldn't have done better, right? But
Yeah.
he would have done better if he wasn't racing right after me. And he was not third in that race. He was fifth in the road race. And then a week later, the men had a team time trial, which back in those days too, and this is hard for anyone to visualize, was 100 kilometers with only 4 guys. Wow. It was like one of the hardest things you could ever imagine doing. And they did win the bronze medal in that. So, but it was, it was kind of a small consolation because that opening day was such a big day. And because another American won the men's race. Alexei Grewal won the men's race. Canadian Steve Bauer was second. And Norwegian unknown at the time, Dag Otto Lauritsen was third. And Davis came in not that far behind, but in fifth. And it was a big disappointment for him. It was hard on us. Going to be honest. It was hard on us.
Now, no, Robyn, you wanted to ask about the pathway into cycling, particularly from speed skating, right?
Yeah. So, of course, that wasn't even your first Olympic Games when you won a gold medal in the road race.
Right.
You were only 14 years old when you competed at the Winter Olympics, and this was in 1972. I guess growing up.
It was a long time ago.
It was in 19...
Yes. Yeah.
And how was it going into that sort of environment as one of the youngest people to compete for your country?
Yeah.
Like, is there more or less pressure? And you were speed skating at the time as well.
Yes, that really famous sport of speed skating in England. So yeah, but a little known fact, Trish Liggett, Phil Liggett's wife, was a speed skater. So you do have speed skaters. You do have a history of speed skaters.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she was quite good. But anyway, I came from Wisconsin, which is in the northern part of the U.S. It's very cold there. And we don't have a lot to do in the winter. So the boys all played ice hockey, and I skated out on our frozen playground across the street from my home. And I was fast at all the games of tag and, I'll capture the flag and things like that. And one thing led to another, and I was doing we had some straight line sprints we did in our town, like city championships. And I was winning those, and then the speed skating club said, "Why don't you join?" And my parents kept saying, "We can't do that." I had 3 brothers. My mom had multiple sclerosis, so she wasn't able to, get up and go a lot of times, drive me around because I would have had to be driven across town for the training. So it took me quite a while. So I really didn't start racing and speed skating until I was 12. And 2 years later, I made the Olympic team. At the time, you could make the team just based on your trials results. It had nothing to do with any World Cups. I'd never skated out of the country. I hadn't even skated in Canada, and I didn't live that far from Canada. So, so it was a pretty big shock. And to be honest, I never really got much faster than when I was at 14. And so much of that was the pressure. I started training way too hard. I got injured. I was anemic. I was fortunate because the U.S. Speed Skating Association had hired a Norwegian coach to come over, and all the more elite skaters had their own coaches. So I got the benefit of really good scientific training, which he was teaching me all about the mitochondria and how your body reacts on a cellular level to training, which I understood less than I understood how, to compete. But I did follow it into a lifelong study of exercise science and got a master's degree in that field because it was really interesting to me and intriguing. And I liked how my body reacted to training. I didn't like when I didn't improve, but in some ways I was fortunate because I was kind of an outlier in all regards. I didn't really fit in at school, and so speed skating gave me the chance to miss most of high school and still graduate and travel the world. And then by the time I did become a cyclist, because I had become injured in speed skating, finally I gave it up, and I was using the bike to actually ride across town or started entering a few little races because of my peers, Sheila Young-Lockwitz, who was a world champion in both cycling and speed skating, but never got the chance to compete at the Olympics in her discipline of sprint cycling during her career. She was a peer of mine, so cycling seemed like a natural progression for me. I also had a brother who bike raced before I did, and so I would hang out at the races a little and thought they were fun. They were more fun than speed skating races.
How did your kind of team setup, so the US national team setup, change from being 14 in 1972, doing speed skating at the Winter Olympics, through to 12 years later, 1984 home games? Was there how close to the kind of level of support of modern riders today was the team back then? Was it all very spit and sawdust? You got to pump your own tires up, pack your own kit, iron your own socks, or did you have a soigneur? Was anyone looking after your mealtime?
I'm already laughing. I just, this brings me to when Taylor, our son, started competing, and he would ask me, "Mom, what kind of disc wheels did you use?" Honey, that was before all of that. Well, what kind of aero bars did you use? No, wrong question. No, let's talk about the equipment in 1984 first. Like, I had toe clips.
Okay. Yeah.
We hadn't started into the step-in pedal era. That was coming really soon. And disc wheels actually had arrived onto the scene just in that year, basically. What was the support like? We, fortunately at our national team level, we actually did have a Polish coach who was overly ambitious in a lot of ways and never was really my coach. He really coached the girl that was second to me at the Olympics, Rebecca Twigg. But I was already, by the time he came in, I was a little more established. And so he kind of let me do my thing. But I was really self-coached, and Davis, was he was like the objective voice in my training, knew when I was doing too much, or there was never really a case where I was doing too little, because I think elite athletes are just hardwired to usually do too much. And so did we have a soigneur? Yes, we did. We at the Olympics, we had Shelley Versus, actually, who went on to work with the national team, the 7-Eleven team at the Tour de France, and first female to do so, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
But we also, she was a big first. But on my team, I had Monica McWhirter, who was married to one of our Olympic teams, Danny Van Hout. She's now Monica Van Hout, but she was the soigneur, basically team manager / driver / bottle filler / everything for our trade team. And she, kind of accompanied me to the Olympics, but of course couldn't be credentialed to help. But our trade team at the time, we were 4 women. That was as big as the team got. We didn't have a ton of funding. We had a van, probably an 8-passenger van, so the bikes mostly fit inside, but some went on top. We had a mechanic at big races, but I didn't really usually have a spare bike. And my father-in-law, Davis's dad, was an aerospace engineer, and together he and I built my own race wheels. So that means we bought the rims and we bought the spokes and the hubs, and then I laced them. I'd like to see anyone in the modern peloton who laces their own wheels. It's an art form.
That's very impressive.
Long lost. Yeah. And so I would, get them, and he would true them to just, micro millimeters. Then, if I wrecked that pair of wheels, I was in trouble. And sometimes I had a spare, but rarely, we just didn't have a lot of excess equipment in those days. So, all the bikes were custom made. They weren't, nowadays everyone has a training bike and they have a new race bike at every race, and they have several. It's just so different. But we established camaraderie, and I don't know, it was different. And we were in a real growth phase for women's cycling that actually kind of stalled out after sort of in the late 80s. It really stalled out, and then took a long time to really get going again, I think. And now it's just fantastic what I'm seeing out there, the level of competition, the pay scale, everything is finally coming up.
And one of the races, I think I recall in a previous interview that you mentioned, was so important for the women's peloton back then. It was the Coors Classic race.
Right.
And it was a race for both men and women. And it was quite a lengthy one. Could you talk us through sort of the state of racing at that time? What did a sort of season look like for you? And how this race helped change things for the women's peloton at that time?
Yeah, well, we had a couple things that really helped. One was we always started our season down in Texas, and there was a series down there literally called the Tour of Texas, but it wasn't a stage race. It was a multi-weekend and sometime during the week race. A lot of, there were road races and criterium-style races. And so we and the men and women were racing in all of those always on the same day. And I have always argued that the men and women should be racing on the same day. And that's how you get the crowd and keep the crowd, But so we were able to kind of kick it off there. And then we'd sort of go into a void where there really wasn't much in the spring for the women. And I used to go to race in Europe, but the racing was so disorganized and chaotic. It wasn't helpful to go to Europe. I did several self-funded trips to just strictly race in Holland or Belgium. In Belgium, the women's racing wasn't that developed, but in Holland, it's always been developed. Ironically, I'm doing these two sports that the Dutch are so good at, right? Speed skating and cycling. I must have Dutch genes, but so we didn't have much. So in the Olympic year, actually, I raced exclusively at men's races in the spring. So I had a 6-week campaign of men's races. And then we had Olympic trials in June and a couple other women's series. But the Coors Classic was so pivotal because the director, Michael Eisner, always wanted to bring women over who could challenge us, and specifically me. He was always targeting me, like, oh, well.
Felt so attacked.
It made me better, So he would bring over the top Finnish woman, the top British, the top Dutch, the top French, top Italians. They were all here racing us on home soil, and also at altitude. We had an advantage, which helped us because it gave us confidence, and we were racing before big supportive crowds. And I think the crowds at the time supported everyone. It wasn't very nationalistic because we weren't racing for national teams generally. Yeah. We were racing on our club teams. And so, it just created an environment that was just not duplicated anywhere. And that was unfortunate. And that only lasted through 1988, which is part of why I think women's cycling took a dip, because men's cycling started taking more precedence. And I would argue that a couple things happened. One was that we had the Tour de Trump. Yes, yeah. Sponsored by the Donald.
Yes, you did.
And they did not include a women's race in that. And that was that was all of a sudden the standard, that they could have these stage races. And I think that only lasted for a year, maximum 2. But then I was taken over by DuPont, which is a big company, and still no women's race. And so the problem was, all of a sudden, the Tour de France also in the American eye became more popular. And we had, Greg LeMond racing there, and then we had Lance, and we had all of this, and it just became very disproportionate, and women's cycling really suffered, I think, in the shadow of all of that. And And so that, that's kind of the, in a nutshell, history of women's cycling. But I really was in a heyday. We had 50,000 people come to some of the races.
Wow.
To watch live. And remember, we didn't have a lot else going on. Nobody was looking at their smartphone. There weren't any. There were only 3 channels on TV. I mean, so people went to live events, and it was like, a music festival. It was lively. It was fun. It was chaotic. And you get to, cycling's special because you get so close to the athletes, right?
Yeah.
That's a really important part of the sport. And Davis was a complete star. My husband was a complete star of the Coors Classic, just winning all the time. And so that was fun. I won a lot too, but I think he was a hometown boy. He's born and raised here in Boulder. So it was a big story. We were a big story, and it was fun.
So given that, was it difficult for you seeing, having lots of success at the Coors Classic, seeing how integral that was to the women's racing calendar, and then seeing in 1984 the ASO finally bring back the Tour de France for women, the Tour de France Feminine? There was an edition in 1955, which I think, speaking to what you said, had loads of spectators and went down incredibly well, but the men in ASO just didn't like it and kind of shook their heads at it, and it didn't resurface for another nearly 30 years. But that's the same summer that happens in France as the Olympics in Los Angeles. Was that a crossroads for you, and what took you to the Olympics versus what didn't take? What could have been? Do you ever think about what could have been if you'd have raced that Tour de France?
Oh no, that would never have been an option to choose the Tour de France over
really?
No. It wasn't just a very big deal.
Okay,
no, it wasn't even. It was an unknown. They were really imitating what was going on at the Coors Classic. Mm-hmm. I think they saw the success of the Coors Classic and they said, "Wow, we can have this in France." And so, unfortunately, it was at the same time. That's why, you had to choose. You couldn't do one or the other. And it's exciting that our American, Marianne Martin, who also lives here in Boulder and also has red hair, won that first edition. Yeah. And that's super exciting. And I'm so happy for her. And I'm happy we had such strong women going over there. We had depth of women, and that was because we had the Coors Classic. We had strong women. And I'm so glad those women got the opportunity. But even having said that, in 1984, I was so burned out afterwards. I never imagined another day of racing, which was odd because I was only 27. But you have to put it in context of the times. At the time, 27 was kind of old.
Yeah. Well, Robyn pointed this out to me, that at that time you're kind of eyeing retirement, even though you've gone to the Olympics, you've got a gold medal, but you're thinking, I'm going to retire at the end of this season. But in the roster of riders that you beat was Jeannie Longo and Mary Cannan, so Italian, French women, who then became the kind of the big rivalry in women's cycling. 2 huge stars. So you beat the best riders who proved themselves to be the best riders year after year after that. Do you ever feel in another world your talent could have been stretched out, I suppose, so you didn't have that burnout? What led to the situation where at 27, despite the fact that, as you say, that was quite old at the time, led to you saying, I'm going to hang up my wheels?
It's such a good question. And, now you look through it through the filter of women in their 30s. Up to 40, even 40, which was unheard of even 10 years ago, right? But at the time, Maria came from cross country skiing, and she was older, and she had a school age child, and also named Constance, by the way, Connie. But Maria came from a small, she came from the mountains, and I don't think for her age felt like an obstacle. She was such a talented athlete and loved to compete. And I think it felt more natural for her. Whereas for me, I think too, I thought that I had other career goals and life goals that were not compatible with cycling. I didn't like the pressure that I felt because the depth wasn't super huge. The pressure was always to win. And if I wanted to get better, I'd have to race in more men's races. And they were frankly pretty dangerous, even though I enjoyed racing in them, and I sometimes did pretty well. But also it just didn't feel like the season was full enough. So sure, I could have kept racing, but what would there have been? There would have been the Tour in the middle of the summer, but not a lot of build up to it. And even in this country, we had a couple other races that popped up. There was one in Idaho, and there were some, but it just didn't feel like enough. I felt like there were other things I wanted to do, and I don't think I really regretted it, although, I would see Jeannie every year after, and she's just missed racing against me so much. She really did. She would always tell me. And I kind of reminded me a little bit of Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe. I don't know if you remember that tennis rivalry, and Borg quit kind of early, and McEnroe was like, wait, what? And it's just, some of us aren't, and some of it's just mental and emotional. I think it was just too stressful for me. I didn't have it to do that. And my mom wasn't doing that well. And every time my mom would take a dip, it was hard for me. And she ended up dying pretty young. She was only 55 when she died, and that was in 1987.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so because I could continue to spend more time at home in the summers, and visit them, I won't ever regret being able to do that. But at the same time, and Davis's career was taking off like stratospherically because he got to turn pro. I was an amateur the whole time. Remember that we had rules we had to abide by. One time, me and one of my teammates won like almost, $15,000 at a race, which would have paid for our whole next season. It was like a late season race in Atlantic City. And our club received the funds because that's how it went, but they were supposed to give it back to us for expenses. And the club kept the money. Whoa. That's kind of the world. That's the world we lived in. And that was 1983. And they said, well, we're going to use it for our expenses. And these are like masters men decided to basically steal our money. Oh. And so, we had experiences like that. And it's just, I was like, how is that sustainable? Right? What am I going to do? And how much can you fight? I went to a big reunion last year with a bunch of my club teammates from many generations, and they were telling me, you were really tenacious. And I said, I had to be. We had to scrap for every dollar, and every wheel we put on our bikes and stuff. It was just so different, and we had to be, like, that's mine. But it was just really different, and it's a pleasure to see how professionalized the sport has become over time. And the one thing I would say has not changed is the attitude, like the mental focus and attitude that a woman has. So when Kasia and I talk, I understand her. I know where she's coming from. I know what it feels like. She's at such a higher level physically than I could have ever imagined. But I do understand the self-doubt. I do understand the chances you take in a race, and when they work out, great. When they don't work out, But they also get a lot more second chances because there's so many more big races. So I think I would have had fun in this generation, but I honestly have no idea how I would have done.
Has there ever been a moment in a race where, say, you're watching, obviously, your daughter-in-law, Kasia, and you see a bit of yourself in her?
I wish. Yes, of course. There's a little bit of that. But not a lot. She's, their level of racing, I only raced total 8 years. And if I looked at the total number of hours I raced versus the number she's raced, her career is 3-4 times what I was able to do, And so yes, I can see myself sometimes, but I do know how it feels, though. I know how it feels.
Yeah.
And I think I can, I think I'm a good shoulder in that regard. But yeah, I see how tough these women are. And when you step away from a sport that's so hard, like cycling, you don't remember how hard it is, for one thing. And you also, when you see how hard they're going, you're like, did I really do that? Wow. And and it's always surprising. But at the same time, yes, I did. I pushed myself as hard as I could, and I know what that feels like.
Do you think it was important to Davis and, in a way, important to Kasia that respective partners, so you're a cyclist and then a retired cyclist, and Davis is still riding, and Taylor is retired as of 2019, but Kasia's obviously riding to a very high level now. Is it important for a cyclist to kind of have a cyclist as a partner, because anyone else would just go, hey, where are you half the time? And I don't understand what you're doing or what you're going through.
I think it's easier on some level, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, we as partners might also be a little less soft in our response sometimes, like, get over yourself. Just move along. But I think it's helpful. I think in terms of couples, there are many, many, many successful male and female cyclists, long-term marriages. Davis and I have been married more than 40 years. It's a long time. Yeah. But and there's a depth of understanding about each other right from the get-go that you have because of your sport, I think, and because of your shared love. Because we don't just love our competitive selves. We love to ride bikes. We love to take adventures. We love that kind of spirit, right? And I think that's probably more of a key than a female or male racer being with a former racer. It's just that kind of little bit of love of adventure is what, for us, is what keeps us going. And it's a big part of Davis's and my journey with his Parkinson's disease. Is understanding where that fits in and how to manage it, and why we do the work we do with our foundation to help other people. Is all of that solid foundation that we had, and the kind of coaching we received or that we gave to each other and that we're able to give to other people. So I think, I don't know if I totally answered your question, but part of it.
No, but that's an important point to delve into. Davis was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's at the age of 40. Is that right? So that's horribly young. How
it is.
It's such a big and difficult question to answer, but how did you guys cope with it, particularly in light of what you just said, which is you're bonded not just through cycling, but through a shared love of adventure, that adventurous get out there spirit, and something like Parkinson's, that's going to stop that in its tracks, or it begins to. So how did you deal with it?
Well, I think we were lucky that we had two children, ages 6 and 10. So Taylor was 10, and his sister, our daughter, Kelsey, was 6, and that certainly keeps you looking forward to the future, and trying to focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. It certainly was a huge shock, and there wasn't a lot of information out there for people in our situation. And so the internet wasn't much help at all, because it normally talked about people that were 70 and diagnosed with Parkinson's, which is equally a difficult diagnosis, but it's you're in such a different life situation. And so I think, though, that our bond was super strong. Our motivation to raise our kids in a lively household was important. My mother had set such a good example as a person who lived with a chronic, debilitating neurological disease that I wasn't as afraid of it as I might have been had we both not experienced her strength through her disease journey, which was also at the time there were no treatments available for people with MS. And it was very scary for her, I'm sure, but she knew she probably hid it too much, but at the same time, she was strong, and she tried to normalize things, and she raised 4 kids, not 2.
Wow.
So, and she was younger. She was 30 when she was diagnosed. So, the disease kind of met its match in us. And I think that's also what gave us the confidence or courage to start the foundation, because we felt like we were appropriately prepared or armed with what we knew and what we wanted to learn about the disease in order to help other people. And that's always been our focus. So, I'm not going to say it's been easy because, it's been 25 years with let me just reiterate, a chronic neurological, degenerative, incurable disease. And it is not easy. Parkinson's disease is 24/7. But, I've never heard Davis complain about it.
Wow.
It's just the challenge that we have. And it is rather ironic that when we are out riding our gravel e-bikes and having the absolute time of our lives, and we spend about a third of the year in Girona now to be near Taylor and Kasia, and to ride with them on the gravel roads there, in the back roads, the hinterland. And almost every time we ride with Taylor, especially, we have a new adventure on a new road we didn't know existed through parts of the countryside. And so that's what fills us up and keeps us going. But you have to be able to see your way to get there, and stay focused. So the irony of it is that people will say, "You're riding e-bikes?" We're like, "Aren't you? You're cheating." I'm like, "Who are we cheating? We're here. We're the ones smiling." And so we, we're both in our 60s, and we feel so fortunate to be able to still do that. And it's not easy for Davis. Part of his Parkinson's is really different one person to the next, and his really affects his hands and especially his feet. But when he's clipped into his pedals, it works. And I'm telling you, that man will follow Taylor downhill or Kasia downhill at full speed, and I just have to close my eyes.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah. No, it's amazing though, and so much of it is, this can-do attitude and accepting what you can't do. I mean, there are things that we can't do.
Yeah.
But I can't do some things either. Some of that comes with age and, your body not doing everything you want it to do. And so, you do your best, and it can be exhausting for both of us. But, Davis Phinney Foundation, and the only mistake I made is, why didn't I put my name on there too? We help, hundreds of thousands of people a year, and we're very proud of that. So that keeps us going too, and it keeps him going as an icon. I think he'll be remembered a lot more for his work with the foundation than he ever would have been for winning Tour de France stages or, being a pioneer in American cycling. So, we all have choices what we're going to do with our time and how we feel about what we can do. And we're feeling pretty lucky.
At Cyclist Magazine, we travel all over the world in search of the best places to ride bikes. And honestly, I think of all the rides we've ever done, the one that has stuck in my mind the most has been to Slovenia's Julian Alps. And this year, SloVelo Escapes can take you there too. Now, just to let you in on what that ride was like, we rode up the Würzig Pass and the Mangart Saddle Road. And these roads are just insane. I mean, I've never seen anything where there's such an incredible combination of hairpins, tunnels, elevation, and even cobbles. Now, the Würzig Pass literally has 50 hairpins over 24 kilometers. And then the Mangart Saddle Road winds up nearly a kilometer through 5 tunnels and then summits at over 2,000 meters. So this year, with SloVelo Escapes, you can discover these roads too. And they've got an amazing package to the Julian Alps. It's running from the 2nd to the 8th of June, and prices start from just £1,400 for a week. Now, that's everything from airport transfers through to expertly guided, fully supported riding, staying in luxury accommodation, and eating food made by your own private chef. All you've got to do is ride your bike around some of the most incredible roads in Europe. I mean, you just go to Slovenia and you kind of think, it's no wonder that Tadej Pogačar ended up being so good if this was where he grew up and this was where he learned to ride a bike. So head over to sloveloescapes.com. That's sloveloescapes.com and saddle up for your next big cycling adventure in Slovenia.
And one thing I wanted to touch on as well was, as you said, it was in 2000, and that's quick maths, 25 years ago. Especially with now you have the internet right at your fingertips. You have those years of research as well. When you're caring for someone with Parkinson's, what level of support is there for you, like in the early 2000s?
Zero.
I suspected, but I didn't want to say zero.
Zero. You basically, and, actually a lot of people even today, especially if you're diagnosed in a more rural part of the world, will be told of this diagnosis and not given very much, which is why we created what we call the Every Victory Counts manual, which is a huge manual, which takes you through every facet of Parkinson's disease, and it's free. And we give out tens of thousands of those to people. We could have really benefited from something like that we could have paged through and some of it you're just like, oh no, that looks terrible. But on the other hand, you're not just having this vision of a stooped older man, trembling older man. That's not what Parkinson's is. It's so diverse across a wide variety of people. We have many people with Parkinson's that don't have any kind of tremor, but they have a lot of other symptoms that are difficult to live with. So when he was diagnosed and, we were sent home, that doctor was retiring. The diagnosing doctor, and he referred us to another doctor. We went to him and he literally said to Davis, I'm going to give you some medicine. You're going to feel as good as you've ever felt in your life. That was the first lie. Yeah. And that gentleman retired and went into he moved over to pharma to make more money, I think, so doing research there. So we went to another doctor and then another doctor. And what we discerned after a couple of years was that we really weren't making any progress with the doctors. And we moved to Italy for 3 years because we had a bike touring business at the time. And we were doing camps out of Tuscany and the Dolomites. And so we picked a spot in between. And we moved with the kids and we just decided to reinvent ourselves for a few years and let Davis adjust to let us all adjust to his diagnosis because the medical care wasn't as essential at that time, and we just weren't getting it. It wasn't helping. And when we came back 3 years later, it was better. We were able to find better resources, and it's really improved over these last 15 years for newly diagnosed people. Not only us as a resource, a lot of people come to our foundation first and get the resources they need, and the belief that they can deal with this comes a lot from us.
What is the area, I would say, that you find yourself the most heavily invested with the foundation?
The mission of the foundation is to help people with Parkinson's live well today. And we should all have that as a mission, just to live well today, look after each other and do the best we can. But anyway, that's really our mission. When we formed our foundation, the Michael J. Fox Foundation was already in progress funding research in a phenomenal way. They were funding curative research. We decided that if we could fund research, if we could raise enough money to fund research, we would fund research into quality of life. And so what we've learned through that is that actually exercise is the best medicine for people with Parkinson's. It modifies your symptoms. It's the best thing you can do for symptom management. I mean, this is the same with diabetes too, and for probably most depression, most conditions can be alleviated to some extent with proper exercise, just getting out and moving. So that was lucky for us. And as it turns out, cycling is also especially good because of the repetitive motion of cycling. It does something to the brain that actually really helps a person with Parkinson's. And this may also be why Davis's Parkinson's is quite well managed. That, and he had deep brain stimulation, and he uses, a lighter dose of meds than a lot of people in his situation. But he does wake up every day and figure out what he's going to do. First of all, it's like, what am I going to do for exercise? So we have a program that we're just rolling out now that a researcher from Cleveland Clinic created called Pedaling for Parkinson's. And Jay Alberts gave that over to our foundation to run. And that's a nationwide program for people with Parkinson's based on the science that Jay Alberts and his team did in Cleveland. And so, it's science-based. It's a science-based workout it turns out if you have forced exercise, which forced doesn't mean like get on the bike. It means get on the bike and force yourself to pedal at a higher RPM than would normally feel comfortable to not so much to someone who used to race, but to an average person, that this will help you modify your symptoms and be good for you. So we have these programs in gyms across the country and that are rolling out. And we're trying to get more and more people doing that because that's a big focus for us. But otherwise, it's just, we've been so lucky with our foundation to meet all the top experts around the world and to be able to talk to them and to be able to get them on webinars and be part of our story. It helps us personally, but it also has helped so many other people because it's a conversation. I think anything we do in life that's long-term, like our conversation here is, should be mutually informative, right? I'm waiting to learn some things from you guys, but you're going to give it to me. But the thing is life is a conversation, right? And so I think when you journey with a disease, a big part of what you do is you're learning all the time. And for some people, it gets difficult because apathy is part of Parkinson's for some people, where you just can't, you don't feel like you want to do anything. And so it's pretty hard to say, well, get on your bike. But once they do, if you can get people out and moving and then they get that feedback, it can really help. But so that's what we do, and we're lucky to do it, right? You can see I get pretty fired up talking about it because the work matters. The work we do for people matters. And I think as humans, we're all looking and striving to do work that matters. And so maybe when you ask me, like when I stopped racing at 27, maybe I stopped because I didn't think it mattered enough. I didn't understand how it mattered. And I can see it through my daughter-in-law now, or I could see it through my son when Taylor was racing, how much his results or his personality in the peloton mattered to other people, and excited other people. And you can see it sort of from the outside looking in. And I think pro sports do matter for people. I think we need icons in the world. We need aspirational people. And so, especially someone like Kasia, because she's, nobody tries harder than Kasia, and that's why she has so many fans. And I think, arguably you could say, Taylor did the same and Davis did the same. Davis didn't have that perfect musculature for a cyclist. He was very muscular, but he loved cycling. And so, so this is what we do. And, we're seeing it now. Our daughter also does work that matters. She's working she has a master's in public health because she wants to help people, and this is kind of who we are. And I think I'm really proud of my kids, for what they do.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that's shone through a lot already in our chat is how important family is, how family, as you say, you were able to focus on your young kids to pull you through the beginning of some dark times. I wonder, over the years, watching Taylor particularly progress into the sport that you used to do, your husband used to do, how it felt knowing the risks that he would be taking as well as the successes that he may find. And in particular, something that lots of cycling fans will remember, a really horrible crash in 2014 at the US Nationals. And as a mother and a mother cyclist, what's seeing, or maybe I'm not sure if you watched it, but knowing about that, hearing about that, seeing that potentially did, and what conversations come after it?
Well, I remember seeing Sean Kelly at a race once. I think it was before the start of Paris-Roubaix, and Sean, raced in my husband's era. And Taylor was, going to go up to the presentation and he goes, "How are you doing? How's the boy doing?" And I was like, "I don't know, but this scares me." And he goes, "Yeah, we know too much." And I was like, "Yes, we do. Yes, we do." And, the first time I ever saw him racing at Roubaix was we were jumping sectors with some of his BMC. We were in the second BMC car. We were at one of these tough sectors. We're coming down a cobbled hill at 150 miles an hour. And Taylor's at the front. And I was just like
heart in mouth.
Meanwhile, Davis was going, "Yay!" And my daughter was there too, and she's like, "That's Taylor," And so I never thought he would become a bike racer, to be honest. And when he did, of course, we supported him as best we could. But at the time, it was hard to know what to do. And, ironically, I'm kind of going through this with one of the girls I coached when I was coaching cycling was Didi Demet Barry, whose son is Ashlyn Barry, who's one of the up-and-coming, really superstars, young racer. So now I'm experiencing this through her eyes because she's having the same terrors I was having. And I just said, you just got to buckle up your seatbelt and do what you can and stay involved, because I think staying involved helped Taylor a lot. I think it's really hard for North Americans who have to go to Europe and base there, and it's very challenging. So on the one hand, I got to spend more time with Taylor between the ages of 18 and 22 than most parents would get to spend. I was really his logistical manager with all of his lifestyle stuff, and also helped him to put the money in the bank so that when he did retire, it was a job well done, and he had good investments. So I felt good about that. I was there the day he crashed. In 2014, and it was an error of a referee's motorbike. And I think the hardest thing for me was that it was a USA national championship. It was a USA motorbike, a referee on a motorbike that stalled out, made an error that almost cost my son his life. Maybe would have cost him his leg. And no one ever took responsibility for that. And so for me, the hard part for me that's lingered is that lack of accountability. And I really, truly believe in accountability. And that's been a sticking point for me. Luckily, my son is much more magnanimous than I am. And I think his meditation, he came out of that a changed person, not only a wonderful artist. You can see one of his paintings behind me.
I was wanting to ask you, is that a Taylor Phinney special?
Yes, and that's one of his early ones. It's called Birth of Man, and Davis loves that one. Okay. But it's spectacular. But so he came out a changed man, but it was also had to meditate. He had to do a lot of yoga. And the fact that he came back and was able to do the Tour de France twice and finish twice and be competitive. And I know we went to the first stages of the first Tour de France he did in 2017. And he, on the first day it rained during the time trial, and it was very dangerous. That's when Valverde crashed and had a horrible broken leg.
That was the one in Dusseldorf, wasn't it?
Dusseldorf, yeah.
I was there that day as well. I met Taylor when he came down from the team presentation. Yeah, and he was just such a wonderful person.
He's so wonderful. So I want to tell you two stories about Dusseldorf. So one is, it's called the Paris of Germany.
Yes.
I love that. And I love telling people we went to the start of the tour in Dusseldorf, and they're like, I did not know that was part of France.
I always get that as well.
Yeah. But anyway, and so he kind of took it easy during the time trial, thankfully. But then the next day, he went off from the start because his team, the EF team, had not been doing very well at the tour, and their goal was just to get one guy on the podium one day, even if it's just for the points, one of the points jerseys or something. So he knew he was going for the King of the Mountain that day. And I just thought, what an ambitious thing on the first day of your first Tour de France, or the first road day of your first Tour de France, like a 250K stage or something, and you take off within the first 5 kilometers. Who does that? But he got the polka dot jersey, and so they basically achieved their goal on the second day of the tour, which was great. And it was a great experience for him all the way around, to be there. But he still had to do his yoga every day. He had to have 2 hours of PT every day just to keep going. He had to meditate every day just to keep his head in the game, right? And so it was never easy for him. But another cool story about Taylor is before the race, he said, Mom, I need some books. And of course, he didn't tell me that when I was flying over from the US. He tells me when I get to Dusseldorf. Luckily, it's a university town, and they have a pretty good English section in the local library. And I said, what do you want? He goes, anything by Murakami. And this is very dense reading material from a Japanese writer. It's very well known. And so I went to the store and I said, what do you got in Murakami? And they had a whole bunch of them in English. So I took a photo. I said, which ones do you want? And he said, I want all of them. And so...
Is he paying for all of them?
I wasn't that worried about that, but he said, this one year is going to kill me because I have to carry the luggage on and off the bus. They were heavy. But anyway, he read every single book during that tour. And I just think that tells you something about him, too. Just who he is. And, and I don't know. My pride shines through. Both my kids are really intelligent, emotionally intelligent as well. And I think that probably means more to me than anything, to be honest. And I think some of that comes from being raised in a family where one of your parents is really challenged and having to learn to step up. So that's what we got.
Is there a sort of synergy, do you think, between Taylor being an endurance athlete and Murakami, who is also into his ultra distance running, I think, as well as being an amazing author? There's something in that perseverance sort of strategy.
Yeah, I know. I think I saw that one about, didn't he write What I Think About When I'm Running or something like that, Murakami? Yeah. Possibly. I don't know. I'm a really well-read person, and I've never read Murakami, so I guess I've got something to look forward to. But it's just interesting what clicks, right? And I think it's also like what you need to get through. And every rider in the peloton is damaged on some level, right? Everyone's experienced bad crashes of some sort, and they do come together, and they have a spirit together, and some of that may be lacking as you go forward because there's so many young ones coming up, right? And I worry about the young guys that are coming up and going right into the pro peloton, that the transition isn't big enough, and that we're not really doing them any favors at 19 by putting them in these situations. And it's not safe, and just the amount of road furniture on any given road anywhere is amazing too, right? So I think when Taylor was ready to stop, the last photo I had of him, it was in London actually, of him crossing the finish line, and he crossed with one leg out of the pedal, and it was like, that was it, what's his bad leg? It was like, I'm done. He said the minute you start thinking about not being there, you can't be there anymore. It's not safe. And his team was really helpful to help him, ease out of it then. I think that was also helpful. And I think that probably more riders need a little bit of that, but it's a sport we love, or we love to hate, or I don't know what we do. Sometimes when we're watching it, we're like, no.
Yeah, there's mixed feelings sometimes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, did you have, what were your experiences like in terms of loving to hate cycling and hating and loving cycling at the same time with that period in the 90s? I'm assuming that you guys are probably very close with Greg LeMond and Kathy, just because you're North Americans on tour in Europe, and Davis and Greg are racing in a similar era, same team sometimes, I think. And famously, LeMond, in retrospect, said after his accident where his brother-in-law accidentally shot him hunting, he was out for nearly 2 seasons, I think. And when he came back, he just said, man, this place has gone crazy. And, he's talking about his office, the peloton, because everyone's starting to take this thing called EPO, and he's not interested. And you guys must have witnessed that. And I wonder what you felt around Davis possibly coming home from, the kind of workplace, in inverted commas, just being like, this is just, excuse my language, shit. Like, I'm racing. I've been racing really hard for years. I'm breaking through into this like very Eurocentric sport, which is difficult anyway. And then now I'm just now here's this other curveball. And
well, I think Davis actually got out just before EPO went rampant in the peloton. I think that there's always been a lot of pushing of the envelope in cycling, and men's pro cycling in particular. But I think that we interestingly, after the '84 Olympics, I was a volunteer, an athlete representative on our anti-doping commission for 8 years. And I saw EPO coming up through those meetings.
No.
And because what happened was in the late 80s, I think when it was first developed, of course, it was a miracle drug for people with kidney failure. And that's why it was developed. But the company at the time didn't put any markers on it, so they couldn't test for it in an anti-doping situation at the time with the technology that was in place. And the head of our committee was actually the lab, the anti-doping lab coordinator, a very well-known man named Don Cadlin, who's since passed away, but he was a real revolutionary in the field of anti-doping. And so I remember watching, reading the studies that had come out of that. And I was in graduate school at the time as well, studying exercise science, so understood what the upside was. But we didn't really see it transition to cycling, I think, full bore until. So when after Taylor was born, Davis decided to race domestically on state, and then raced for Coors Light on more of a domestic team here, and wasn't racing in Europe as much. And so, of course, in America, it was less sophisticated, I think, than what was happening in Europe at the time. So yeah, there were a lot of guys caught in that in the 90s, and a lot of women too. I think that was a really rough time to be in the sport, and a dangerous time too, because people didn't know what they were doing when they were doing that. But we've always been super committed to not doping,
Yeah.
And so just like I'm going to be clean or not clean. But ironically, even in my case, and I've been writing a memoir for the last 10 years, trying to get it done. But one of the stories I tell is Davis said to me, even in January of 1984, he said, "I'm afraid that one of your teammates will possibly, dope to try to beat you." My U.S. teammates. And I said, "What could they take to beat me? Come on." I just, what does that do? What does that do for me? How does that help me to know that, But I said, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and let's see what happens. Well, it turned out two of my U.S. teammates,
really?
Actually, one was taken off the team for having taken nandrolone, which is a steroid. And at the time, they didn't publicize what she'd taken, because at the time you could hide those kind of doping positives by just removing someone from a team. And the other had blood dope the night before the race. And so, I'm glad I was naive at the time, and I could just think, I'm either good enough or I'm not, I'm either ready or I'm not. But I think that it's not near to cycling, it's pushing the limit. And it's hard. It's a hard part of cycling, because cycling's so hard. It's a hard sport.
So I don't know if this will count as teaching, not teaching, but sharing information, helping you learn anything. I reckon you're probably already up to speed with this, but our last episode, we spoke with a chap called Aaron D'Souza, who is trying to implement the enhanced games. So as an Olympian yourself, a gold medalist, competing in an amateur event, competing clean with predominantly or lots of clean athletes, this guy wants to say no holds barred. This is going to be an Olympics style event where anyone can take anything, and in fact everyone's actively encouraged, and we'll partner up with pharmaceutical firms, and they will be able to develop these drugs, and we will administer them to our athletes in a controlled way. We'll also pay our athletes. We'll pay them for their data, so they'll all wear Apple Watch type things, which will be fed back into the machine to be able to analyze what these wherever they are, what these things have as an effect. And he's raising all of this funding. One person who has invested is Donald Trump Jr. So what do you make of something like that? Because this guy is saying, actually, it's going to be beneficial. We're going to see records broken, but we're also going to see sport develop things that will trickle down and become useful to society in a way that currently can't happen, because there are, obviously very decisive ethical ramifications around testing stuff in this very potentially dangerous guinea pig style way. How does any of what I've just said sit with you? You're just thinking what?
Yes, no. I think people will die.
Yep.
I think people will die, and I think that that they'll only do it once.
Yeah.
I'm predicting, but I don't see how this helps anyone actually. So I'm disappointed to learn that. I think that what we want to know, what we're seeing, is we do see the frontiers of human excellence by training and and the length of people's careers. We're seeing more and more of that, but yeah, I can't imagine that. I don't. I'm actually. I'm not usually speechless. I'm kind of speechless. I've heard people talk about this before. Even when I sat on that anti-doping commission, some of the track and field, not track and field, but actually, like we had track and field people on there. We had bodybuilders, weightlifters, not bodybuilders, weightlifters, and other athletes that actually had doped in their past, and nobody's saying it's healthy for you. It's good for you. Yes, you could probably lift more, but it is not good for you. And there are way too many risks involved. I mean, I know there's risks in any kind of competition, but I'm into wholeness and and wellness, not whatever. What are they going to call it? The enhanced games?
The enhanced games. Wow. Yeah, I know. There we go.
I'm already grappling on the E platform because I think there's just too much cheating, and that could happen potentially, in the E sphere. And I just, think about when you were a kid and you were taking a test in school. Like everybody, you kind of wanted to look at your smart neighbor's paper to make sure you had the right answer on yours, right? Like there's always that element of like, what's cheating? Or when you're playing cards, looking at the cards, so as humans, we are kind of wired to cheat a little, right? But that's part of our socialization, is that we learn not to cheat. We learn to play fair. And I guess if everybody's doing something, then maybe they're going to call that fair play. But is it? I don't think so, and I don't think it's fair for your body long term, because certainly there are risks, and huge ones.
Yeah.
So, wow, good luck with that.
Well, I don't want to end on, because at the risk of that having been a bit of a darker note, let's end on a more positive, much higher note. Tell us more about what the Davis Phinney Foundation is doing this year, events, upcoming kind of projects, any ways that listeners and viewers, because this is going out as a video as well, can kind of get involved.
Well, we always appreciate support from around the globe. And, I just encourage anyone that knows anyone with Parkinson's disease to visit our website. It's davisphinneyfoundation.org or .com. DPF, just the initials, works as well. And .org or .com will find us. And, our information is all free. And there's a lot of it. You can request the manuals that we produce, one for care partners, one for people with Parkinson's. And, just if you want to support us, that's great. Hit the donate button. We've got events. We do fundraising around certain events. We have one coming up in Boulder in the middle of May. We have events throughout the summer. We have some big ones, but most of our donations come in at $5-10 at a time, and some much bigger ones. We have some very large donors as well, which enables us to do the work that we do. We just celebrated last fall our 20th anniversary of the foundation.
Amazing.
And we've helped a lot of people in that period of time, and collaborate with other organizations around the world. And it's we do good work, and I think we do work that matters. And I think if I had a message for anyone out there looking to spark up their life, I think the number one thing is to do something you love, and do something to help other people, because that's really what fills us up and keeps us going.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, frankly, I think that's an absolutely wonderful note to end on. Just do more of what you love.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you. Nice talking to you guys.
So, Connie Carpenter-Phinney, ladies and gents, really interesting chat. Wasn't expecting half of the avenues we kind of went down. And I love the fact that it's she's got an incredible memory, for one thing, has led a really interesting life and doesn't mind. I think we maybe touched on some like awkward themes, maybe a few like sad themes, and also indirect things, you know, talking to her about her experiences being a mum with Taylor. And she was willing to talk about that, as opposed to kind of say, you know, it's difficult interviewing some people sometimes where they kind of go, well, I'm not really here to talk about people that are related to me. I'm just kind of here to talk about me. So what I'm getting around to saying is I really enjoyed that, because there was a real warmth and openness and kind of generosity there. So thank you, Connie. Did make me think, though, she's come from speed skating, went into cycling, incredibly good at both. I'm very average at cycling. But if that was my first sport, where might I go to? But I'm going to ask you first, Robyn. If you weren't cycling, or if you were in an inverse Carpenter-Phinney, would you go from cycling into, I don't know, you quite like NFL? Would you cast yourself as an NFL player? Or maybe
Imagine
baseball?
Me being
You're
like
quite
a
into quite into American sports. Where would you pitch yourself to have your 2.0 sport career?
I am very big on American sports, and actually, back when I was a Loughborough University student, I was on the baseball and softball team.
Wow.
So I would probably pivot, because they're not really connected at all, cycling and baseball.
No.
And baseball isn't really that popular in the UK.
No.
You know, cycling is niche, but that's niche. But yeah, I reckon I'd do a kind of 180, and I'd be like Bo Jackson. And if you don't know Bo Jackson, for those listening, he was, I think, the only man to be like in, what do you call it? Not the Hall of Fame, but the only man to be an MVP, I believe, in both sports of baseball and NFL.
Yeah. What was he first? He was in, I'm going to say that you will have never heard of this, because I'm sure it'll be way before your time, but there was a TV cartoon, I think it was called Pro Stars or All Stars, and it had Bo Jackson in there. So it's a cartoon, right? Had Bo Jackson, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, and one more. So they're four. So they're like these American, incredible, like, sporting idols, and they kind of got together and like sort of superheroes and solved crimes, mysteries, using their respective talents at like jumping or hitting stuff. So that's how I know about Bo Jackson. That's you know,
amazing.
Just an FYI. In case you...
So I actually interviewed Bo Jackson a couple of years ago, because he also is a cyclist now, but he does like these charity rides. It started initially to raise money when there was like a hurricane that came through the area and sort of ravaged it. Now every year there's like Bo Bikes banner.
Oh, right.
So yeah, the cycling connection.
It all comes around.
I am Bo Jackson, I would believe.
I feel like the English version of Bo Jackson is everyone's favourite snooker player, Stephen Murphy.
Oh.
Do you know who he is? Have you ever heard of
Will
Stephen
you hate
Murphy?
me if I said no?
No, it's fine. And he's not really, but he's the one because he hasn't actually played multiple sports, but he claims, I think this is correct, to have made a 147 in snooker, you know, aka highest break, to have thrown a, whatever it is it 18 dart finish? So the fastest way you can throw from 501 down to 0, maybe it's 12. So I'm showing my darts naivety here, and have bowled a 360, which is the maximum in bowling. He claims he's the only person in the world to have done those three things, because they are, which sounds kind of ridiculous, like surely someone's done. But then if you think about the precision in each one and the chances of it not going right, so how many times you'd even have to attempt these things? Like is
he the only person to do them in general, or like within a certain time frame?
He believes he's
just in general.
He believes he's the only person. And I'm going to have to just quickly look this up, because it might actually be that he's played like a hole in one as well.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What is this? He's just actually hiding out as the most elite athlete of all time.
I know. And no offense, I doubt he listens to this podcast. He doesn't look like an elite athlete, let's put it that way. But he just looks like a normal person.
I love athletes that look like normal people.
Me too. It gives me hope. We can cut out some of how long this is going to take me to look it up. Because I feel this now needs to be correct, otherwise I'll have this is all just complete nonsense. We have to revise it.
Mona Lisa all over again.
Maybe it wasn't even Stephen Murphy. Yeah, exactly. It's another Mona Lisa moment. It's not. Is it Sean? Maybe it's. Oh, it's fucking Sean Murphy. Shit.
But it's all right because I, messed up on the Bo Jackson bit. So we're humans at the end of the day. These guys are professional athletes.
And you know
we're representing the normal person.
Yeah, and we're so human that we're going to leave all this in. So if you're still with us, I'm now looking up to see if what I've said is even vaguely correct. Because we do all make mistakes, and I'm sorry I swore. But
very sorry.
Let's maybe you're on a really long journey and you don't want to touch your phone to change podcasts because, as we all know, Stormzy got points on his license because he touched his phone. You're not allowed to touch your phone at all in the car, not even to use the sat-nav.
That's very true. I can't drive, but I know that.
Yeah, exactly. He has claimed to be the only person to have achieved a maximum break in snooker, a 9-dart finish. It's nothing to do with bowling, ladies and gents. A hole-in-one in golf. He's claimed to be the only person. He's talking about being the only person in the world. I mean...
No, because I bet you now there'll be like
Bo
at
Jackson's
least...
done that.
Yeah. There'll be like 5 drunk people in a random town somewhere that went on like this fun night out and just did all of those things. And then no one knows because they faded into obscurity.
It's like the time, right? I kid you not. I threw a dart. I don't play darts very often, but I did play in a dart league for a bit. I was terrible, but with my old pa. I threw a dart into the end of another dart.
Oh.
I know. Can you imagine? So threw the first dart, into the board, probably hit like a 3 or something. Threw the next dart, and it just looked like it disappeared.
Wow.
Because you're standing behind it, and I'm like, where's that dart? And then you walked
you
up
thought
around
you'd
it,
like
and
open up a hole.
and they're just one behind the other. No one believes that. No one believes that. I was on my own. Thank you.
I believe it.
I feel like everything in life has now come together for this one moment. Someone believes me. Thanks, Robyn.
You're welcome.
On that note,
that's fine.
We should probably go. But I quite like to be a snooker player, by the way. I do really love snooker. Spent a lot of time in snooker halls as a kid, being terrible. You go in on a Saturday morning and it'd be like glorious sunshine. And you just go into this pitch black room where back in the day people smoked and it was just like really dark, hazy everywhere. And you could press a button like on an aeroplane and they'd come over, and we were only like 14. They'd come over from the bar and take your order. So that was like the system in quite a lot of snooker halls. And you could kind of then drink. So you're there being like 14, 15, drinking your Stella Tops and playing snooker for hours and hours and hours and getting these incredible scores because you just do countless fouls. But anyway, I've always found snooker very, very relaxing in general.
The only time I ever played snooker at uni was like pre-drinks, and I had no care for the rules then at all because I didn't know them. So I would just, be potting things left, right, and center and being like, "Oh, I'm great and amazing," and really, I just wasn't.
Well, it probably turns out that you've got a great cue arm and a potting action, and if you just learnt the rules, you'd be up there with Sean Murphy, aka Stephen Murphy, aka bowling, darts, who cares? Let's go back to our day jobs. Right, it's been lovely, Robyn. Thank you very much, and see you next time on the Cyclist Magazine Podcast.
Bye.